Titus, and for gender balance, this lady here. So we could start with you, and then Titus, and then Polycarp can answer both together if that's okay. And I'm really sorry to everybody else. I'm sure he'll hang around, maybe, hopefully, but let's see.
All right, thank you very much. My name is Diana Sifuna. I'm the CEO of Jonathan Jackson Foundation, a non-governmental organization, youth serving within Nairobi County. We're also members of the British Chamber of Commerce, so I'm glad to be here. And a supporter of Azimio as well, personally, on my personal accord. A question on youth economic inclusivity plan within Nairobi County for Polycarp. Beyond the Azimio Manifesto's ambitious promise to young people, which I've read, I've worked in the youth sector for now 5 years, including the promise of giving the young people 7-year tax holidays. What is your plan to ensure the youths are empowered to create businesses within Nairobi County? It is fancy to talk about the Kazi Mtaani project, and I don't disregard it at all. But I think many young people who are not in employment, education, or training, through no fault of their own, have been disadvantaged, and therefore they resort to having crime, they resort to doing petty crimes and many other things, and their punishment is much more than the corporate criminals that we see in the justice systems. What is your plan to come down to the community and work with us? And I'm also hoping that I'm extending an arm to you as a youth-serving organization in Nairobi to work with you when you get into power, so that these young people do not get into crimes, and when they do, they are corrected using humanitarian ways that helps them to integrate back into society without shame, without being discriminated when it comes to employment in public offices or any other private institution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Polycarp. My name is Titus Ngatia. I'm an emotional intelligence consultant and an entrepreneur. And I greatly appreciate your presentation. I also followed your presentation at KEPSA. Key question for me is, the first question is on the civic discipline you talked about. You know, that can only be an extension of the civic consciousness, the level of civic consciousness among our people. And as you know, for instance, some of the circumstances that drove you into your resignation the last time was an impossible boss. And yet you know that that impossible boss, apparently now going to Mombasa, stands a very high chance of being elected. Why? Because the political class of this country has always taken advantage of the low level of our civic consciousness among the people, and also high levels of poverty. So in that regard, therefore, considering that the politics at the electoral level is a game of persuasion, and in as much as you are easily able to persuade all of us in this room and many other business people, ultimately the ballot is being decided by people who, some of whom maybe, Dismas Mokua describes sometimes that the average voter is emotional and irrational. That ultimately politics is tuning around those emotional chords, and a lot of charlatans get through to office through that path. So I'm really curious how you're also factoring that in your calculation around your vision. But finally, I'm very big on entrepreneurship and on startups. And you know very well that this first quarter of 2022, Kenya has raised about $482 million in terms of venture funding. And I've had a lot of candidates talking about Nairobi being the financial and economic hub of Kenya and the region. So my question to you, therefore, is what is your game plan around venture funding, access, credit products access for various startups coming up in Nairobi? And why can't we even further expand our vision to a point where we desire to produce unicorns coming out of Nairobi? I think the only company trading around NSE is New York now, is Jumia. And Jumia is not exactly very African. And so for me, the question is, considering the kind of innovation we have in Kenya and the kind of genius that we see here in terms of tech, why don't we map that as our path, as our trajectory, our focus area on how we are going to grow our GDP, because we're in the fourth industrial revolution and we don't have to go through the linear path as it was in the previous revolution. So thank you so much for your time.
No, so I'll answer very quickly. Thank you very much. Young people not in education, not employed, and lacking education training opportunities is a big concern for us. The average age of this country is 19. The people below the age of 35 in Kenya actually are 70% of the population or close to that. So Kenya is youthful. They are not a needy, they reflect the society. We will come down to the communities. I thank you very much for your invitation. For me, I've pronounced myself clear. Within my influence, I want to make sure that 8,500 young people are employed within my time in Nairobi City County. Work with the Public Service Commission, put them through opportunities, and they become the future, fresh. Every company I've ever worked for, one of the things that worked for me the most is starting a graduate trainee program and an apprenticeship program. That's really what I'm also going to bring to rebuild and revitalize the civil service or the public service in Nairobi City County. That has not happened, but do it deliberately and work with the national government, school of government, work with the Public Service Commission. By the way, government has better HR practices than private sector. That I know for a fact. I don't even need to debate. I tell a lot of people who underestimate Kenya's government capacity. It's just that that capacity never came to Nairobi City County because Nairobi City County was opposition politics for far too long. Yeah, we will bring that to bear so that we can then grow and develop young people. You've heard how much time I spent talking about education, technical vocational training institutions. The youth are at the center. In fact, I'm always debating in my mind whether we actually need a Ministry of Youth. What we need in Kenya is a Ministry of Geriatrics because they are less than the younger people. This is a pediatric nation. It really is a pediatric nation. So maternal health care, child health care, those are the things to really continue to look at. So judge me based on how many young people will be unemployed or lacking educational training opportunities through my service as a Nairobi County. And that is a real measure that people can measure. You know, how many young people do I start with? The number that I start with and the number that I end with. And let's monitor that number on an annual basis. I think that's a beautiful scorecard. Coming back to your question, to your comments and questions, I think the biggest civic duty of everybody, Kenya has 85, close to 90% literacy rate. You know, people are educated in Kenya. Everybody speaks English. We have a very high level of education. The fact that you have gone to school until Form 4, even Standard 8, means you have civic discipline. You know the national anthem. You know how to behave. You know how to keep time. You know the basics. Civic discipline is asked of us. It is what we sing in our national anthem when we say, Ndio wajibu wetu. Kenya istahili heshima. Kenya deserves respect. Every citizen is called upon to demonstrate that. And there's no bigger respect than going to vote. That is the first action of civic discipline. Many people say, I'm so frustrated with politicians, I will not vote. I say, even if you sleep that day and you don't go to vote, you have voted. You have let the wrong person come to power. It's actually not clever not to vote. Wake up and vote, and go and vote. And that is the first action of civic discipline. Civic discipline is also saying, I will not urinate in every corner and every building I come across and claim that there are no toilets. Yeah, I will not litter, as I will not. I will not attack. I will respect laws. I'll be a law-abiding citizen. I will. Even me as a governor, I'm not a god. I am bound by the laws, the regulations of this country, of this city county. And even if you go to a hotel like this, there are certain rules and regulations. When we went to school, we were given school rules. So that is what I mean by civic discipline. And it's a precursor to fiscal discipline. The fact that we have continuously ended up with the wrong leaders in politics, because we don't have wrong leaders in private sector. We don't have wrong leaders in the religious sector. We don't have wrong leaders in the fourth estate or the media. How come in politics we get it wrong? It's because we trivialize politics. We actually think it's a theater of the absurd. It's time to take politics a bit more seriously. And like somebody once said, politics is too important to be left to politicians. It is time for us to actually vote the right way so that we can have people who are disciplined in charge of our fiscal affairs, in charge of our revenue, in charge of our security affairs, our health affairs, our educational affairs. If we do that, we will start the beginning of the change, to change. And I submit to you, that person is Polycarp Igathe. Thank you very much for listening to me this morning.